salvete omnes. If you remember, I'm going to keep saying it, but it doesn't just mean hello. It means be well. And so we're glad to have you back on our Common Latin podcast. As a review, we are on episode 4. So episode 1 was an overview of the grammar strand where we study Latin in classical conversations. Episode 2 was about task 1, read the Vulgate. Episode 3, we recited the catechism. And if you weren't with us, you should definitely go back and rewatch that episode because Tim got to be the student and Kathy got to be the parent quizzing him on the catechism. So that will be lots of fun for you. And then today we're going to talk about that third task of memorizing vocabulary. So I think, Kathy, you want to start us off about talking about memorizing vocabulary?
Yeah, I love talking about vocabulary. So vocabulary, first of all, it's very essential to anything, right? We can't even speak to each other and share ideas and communicate if we don't have good vocabulary when we're reading. We need to have strong vocabulary skills to understand an author's meaning. We're still learning vocabulary. I still learn new vocabulary words even in English. And it makes me think of Genesis 2, where one of the first tasks God gave Adam was to name the animals. And so naming is not a small thing. It's putting words to those things, and we put words to ideas also. You know, when we teach young children, we're teaching them things. We're pointing things out and naming them and building their vocabulary. So learning Latin vocabulary works the same way. We're just doing it later in life and doing it more deliberately. Tim, can you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We do a lot of vocabulary learning in all of our areas of life. Our foundation students do a lot of vocabulary learning. Some of it's very particular vocabulary. I mean, even some Latin at the foundations level. But we introduce all sorts of things like the different ocean zones, right? Those are hard words for kids. They're not natural words that they hear in their daily life to absorb, and so we have to help them to learn them the same way that we would learn a Latin vocabulary word. So we do that usually with listening, drilling flashcards, writing the words over and over again, repeating them back in rhythms or with songs. Those are really common and familiar ways that we approach vocabulary of all sorts. But the Latin vocabulary is different because they are words that aren't in our daily parlance. They aren't part of our daily conversations with our parents or our friends, but they do help still point at the same things that we point at with our English words. And so they're doing two things in our mind, right? We're storing them alongside an English word that points at an idea and a Latin word that points at the same idea. And for a long time, we think first of the English word and then go looking for that Latin word that's somewhere hiding in our brain, and then we pull it out and like, yeah, right, the Latin word for God, I thought of God first, but the Latin word for God is Deus. But after a while, when it becomes comfortable enough, familiar enough, you stop having to go through the intermediary of the English word, and instead you can start to just pull the Latin word. And that takes time, and it takes some practice, and it takes a lot of repetitions. But that's the way that you start to approach that more natural thinker, writer, speaker in the foreign language that you're studying, in this case, Latin.
Yeah, I was going to weave together some of the ideas you guys shared. So I read a book called Dreaming in Mandarin, and it was describing that progression that you just did, Tim. Like you go from just the painstaking, and especially when you have a different alphabet like Mandarin, we don't have that problem in Latin, but just that painstaking trying to learn a single noun and always having to think about it in your own language first, from going from that to actually having dreams where people are speaking Mandarin. That's a different level. But I wanted to pick up on, Kathy, your thread about, the skill of naming and that idea of Adam naming the animals. I was reading the other day, and there are roughly in English 3 times as many nouns as there are verbs. So that active naming is a profound one for acquiring vocabulary. We have to have names that we all share in order to talk to people about the things that we see in front of us. And then you also mentioned just that active skill of memorizing. And Tim, when you were talking about the ocean zones, it made me think of Dorothy Sayers' essay, The Lost Tools of Learning, because if you remember, she talks about doing that with the kids when it's still pleasurable to say, bathopelagic. It's that there's a time in your life where that's just a fun word to say, and so we can make that true in Latin also. You may not even have an association with it yet, but it's a fun word to say. So yeah, we're all the time. So in the catechism, we talked about memory last week. We're memorizing the rules, and in the vocabulary, we're memorizing the words. And the student needs both of those things, both the vocabulary and then the grammar that can govern them when they get put together in a sentence.
That's good. I was thinking about vocabulary. We all work together on vocabulary for the curriculum itself. And the Common Latin curriculum, so the vocabulary that we use for it comes from the Vulgate. So, and then we designed it to where it would fit with whatever the lesson is. So, for example, if the lesson is on first declension nouns, then we found first declension nouns in their reading and used that for vocabulary lists. And the other thing that I think of when I think about vocabulary and going from one language to the other is that, like Tim was saying, a word actually represents an idea. And so a Latin dictionary will give you many more examples of how a word could be used in the other language than a curriculum vocabulary list would. And I always use the word ago, agri, egi, actus, which is, it means, we learned it as meaning do or act. And I think Henley defines it as do, act, or treat. And I learned that word years ago as drive, lead, do, act, treat. So different curriculum might use different English, comparing it to different English words. But if you look that word up in a Latin dictionary, the Lewis and Short has 3 pages of meanings and examples of just that one word. So when we think about vocabulary, when we're working in Latin, sometimes we'll see a word and we think, well, that doesn't really match the definition that I memorized. But what we're doing is we're adding these words to our vocabulary, and then as we see it used, we're expanding our understanding of how those words are used. We do that in English too. Like I think of the word make in English, and how many different ways can you use that word? And it means different things. Like you can make the bed, you can make a cake, you can make the team. 2 + 2 makes 4. So lots of different ways that we use a single word. How would you define that word, right? And so we encourage students to both memorize the vocabulary that we've given them, but then as they see it used, think about how it's used in the Vulgate. And then also as they come across other words that are interesting to them, just because it's not on the vocabulary list doesn't mean you can't make it one of your vocabulary words.
Yeah, I appreciate you adding those last couple of thoughts, Kathy, because I always love, there's always a moment in challenge where one of the students translates a sentence or a passage and then comes and says, well, I had this, but the answer key said this. And you're like, yes, translation is an art. It's not a precise answer always. There are nuances. And so I always love that when they, that you memorize the vocabulary as your first step, but then you see it in context in the language itself. That's a different thing. And then yes, adding to your own, that was definitely an experience that I had learning Latin. I think you too, Kathy. I made my own Latin dictionary as I went. So
yeah.
So I think the main way that we've talked about several ways, but the main way we're going to talk about today for memorizing vocabulary is to make flashcards. So Kathy, talk to us about Latin flashcards.
Yeah, so I'm going to show you 3 different flashcards. First of all, the way you make a flashcard is going to depend on the part of speech that you're dealing with. So if you're dealing with a noun, you're going to put the dictionary entry. So for this noun, mundus, mundi, we have the nominative form and the genitive form and the gender. And then on the back of the card, you'll put the English definition of that card. Now, if you're dealing with a verb, verbs have 4 principal parts, so you would make that one a little bit different. If I can get my computer to work, there we go. So diligo, diligere, dilexi, dilectum, and that one would mean love. And so you'd put all 4 principal parts on the front and the definition on the back. Here's an example of an adjective card. You just put the form that's found in the vocabulary list or the dictionary, and then of course you put the meaning on the back. And you'll notice that I also wrote a little more information on these cards. You don't have to do that, but like mundus is a second declension noun, and so I wrote second declension. I think early on when you're learning Latin, it's helpful to write that on the front of the card. Diligo is a third conjugation verb, so I wrote third conjugation. As you learn more Latin, what you're going to realize is that the information is already on the card telling you that mundus is second declension. So that's not critical information, but it's just helpful information. Tim, do you have anything else you would add about making cards?
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that what you did and didn't put on the card, that you did put enough information that you can use it to figure out the pertinent information to decline it and use it if you're going to do that in a sentence, which of course you're not going to do in task 3, right? Task 3, you're just reviewing your flashcards. You're just learning your vocabulary. You're not practicing the forms yet, but it is really helpful to have that, to know that it's mundus mundi and not just stop at mundus, because that might not be enough information to tell you what you need to know if you have to go look it up in the dictionary to find more information about it. And the same with the conjugations, right? You have the most important information is on the card, but not all the rest of it, because there is more that's in the dictionary. But the more you put on the card, the harder it is to memorize. And if you clutter it up with a lot of other things, I mean, you can make choices. You could add more information to some of your cards because you think that it's important and you want to make sure that you have it available in your memory. But it's good to have it be this sort of streamlined, simple, just enough and not too much. Like even on the back, like Kathy was pointing out, mundus means world or mankind according to this card. But if you go into the dictionary, you could pull a whole lot more of different ways that it's translated. Even just in the Vulgate, you could find a lot more ways that Jerome translated it, or what the modern English translations of the Vulgate would have a lot of different ways to translate that word. So there's a lot that could be chosen, but it's good to keep it simple and not get carried away with adding a lot of extras onto the flashcards.
Yeah, and I want to say, and then I'm going to call on you to kind of draw out what happens in math that you see that's similar to this, Leigh. So, when, let's say I'm in week 1 and I have 8 Latin flashcards, I'm going to be just memorizing what's on the front and back, right? I have no other thing to do with that information. But let's fast forward, and I'm the student and I get to week 15, and then I've seen mundus mundi, and I've seen filius filii, and I've seen deus dei. My brain is going to start comparing those words. And I'm going to say, I noticed that every single time I have one of these second declension words, it ends in US. And then the second entry on the flashcard ends in an I with the macron. I'm going to start intuiting things about the second declension, even if I don't move on to task 4 and practice the forms. I'm going to begin to start making connections. And you see this in young children when they're learning to speak, and they'll say, I ran across the street yesterday. Well, why do they say that? Because they've learned that a verb plus ed puts it in the past tense. So similar things will happen in Latin as you're just naturally practicing that skill of comparison. So where do you see that happening in math, Leigh? Because I know we talk a lot about Latin and math being similar. You're muted.
Good if I was unmuted. Yeah, because one of the things I wanted to say that and compliment you on these cards, Kathy, is you could have overloaded the back with a lot of information, and you didn't. You just gave the definition. So they're really a great first stab going through. And so the thing is, the brain kind of turns off if you keep doing the same activity. And that's true with the math flashcards. So what you could start doing here is like the verb cards, start sorting just those and try practicing them together. And then you'll see more of those comparisons Jennifer just talked about. Or maybe just do the nouns, or start pulling out the ones you know really, really well and only review them occasionally. Maybe dump them on the floor and put them back in review. And, that's it. So you don't, because you need to spend your best practice time on things you don't know. You need to just use your kind of quick, get in the room, this is what we're going to be doing, practice for things that you do know to get your brain engaged.
That's really good, Leigh, and we're actually going to talk about that in just a minute when we practice. We're going to play teacher and student with Tim again today. So I think we can go ahead and move there, Jennifer.
Yeah, I love that Tim is always willing to be the student, and we are going to continue with in the first task of read the Vulgate. We practiced on John 3:16. Why? Because John 3:16 is very familiar to us in English, and therefore we can start to make some good comparisons in Latin. So we're going to keep going with that today. So Kathy's going to play mom, and Tim is going to play child student of Latin, and we'll let you guys show us what this is like.
Yeah, so Tim, I'm going to, when we did the catechism, I went really fast through it, but since we're doing vocabulary today, I'm going to go a little bit slower. So what I want you to do is I'm going to read the Latin. I want you to repeat the Latin, and then I want you to read the English. And you all will see that I'm flipping back and forth. We're working on memorizing these first three cards. So mundus mundi, masculine.
Mundus mundi, masculine.
And then read the English.
World, mankind.
Okay. Diligo, diligere, dilexi, dilectum.
Diligo, diligere, dilexi, dilectum. Love.
Good. Omnis, omne.
Omnis, omne. All or every.
Okay, and then what I would say to do is when you're practicing flashcards, I'm going to hold up flashcards just to show you. What I usually do with my children is we'll do just like that, and then we'll go through them again. If they get it right, I lay the card down. If they don't get it right, I put it in the back of the stack, and we do that one again. So we just keep going through reading the cards if you need to read them. But as soon as you can actually say the definition before I flip it, that card gets laid down. And what that does is exactly what Leigh was just talking about. You end up with repeating the cards that you're struggling with more often by doing that. So we're going to go through these again. See if you can tell me the definition before we get to it, Tim.
I just want to add, the very first time through, it's not a problem for your child just to read Mundus Mundi and you have no idea what the backside is.
Yeah, that's true. Good. Okay, so Mundus Mundi, Tim. Read it and then.
Yep, Mundus Mundi, masculine is world or mankind.
So you got that right. I would lay that card down. Go ahead and read this one.
Diligo, diligere, dilexi, dilectum is love.
Good.
And omnis omne is all or every.
Yeah, see, he got it on the second try. But we've been looking at those for a while. Very good.
Kathy was kind and gave me some not too hard words today.
Yeah, I didn't want to trip you up today, but that's fine. And I think it makes it kind of painless if you're just reading the words, like Leigh said, read all the Latin words, and then read the backs, just like we did with the catechism when we were reciting it. We read the question and read the answer, and then eventually you get to where you can say the answer without, or say the English without even thinking about it. Jennifer, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just, as the observer, I'll add a couple of comments. So as we just said, Tim read them, and then the second time he already had the definitions. And so I sound like a broken record, but if you have been to a 2026 parent practicum on Common Latin, this is exactly what one of the table talks is. We practice one person at the table being the parent and one person at the table being the child, and putting down on the table the flashcards that they get right and putting the ones that they miss in the back of the pile. And I think it's so important to reiterate that we don't make light of small things. So this is the exact same thing we practice with math flashcards. It's the same thing we practice with foundations, memory, memory master flashcards. If they don't get it, you put it back in the pile. And it's the same thing we do when they're practicing spelling words. And we don't want to overcomplicate. So I didn't have spelling flashcards for my kids, but what I did have was their written list. And if they missed a word, I simply circled it. And guess what? It reappeared the next week and it stayed on the list until we had it mastered. And then we moved on to other words. So that act of just really attending to the child while they're working is really important. So
that's good.
Yeah. And just being oral, like we talked about the catechism, Kathy, that act of your whole body participating is important. Saying it out loud.
Yeah, I agree. It's important to say these words, especially the Latin words, out loud. The other thing you can do after you've gone through the flashcards in this order, you can flip it and try to say the English and then try to do the Latin. That's a little harder. But eventually you get to the point that you can do that too. And I want to expand on what you said about saying it out loud, especially with verbs. It's really important to say all of those 4 principal parts. And you get to the point that when you hear diligo, you can just spout off all the principal parts, and that'll help you be able to recognize those verbs in the reading, because you can see the spelling changes a little bit, right? So you can recognize those different forms.
And that was one of the things that I noticed as I was reading that the first 2, diligo, diligere, both have I, and then the second set have I and E. And so even though I'm not a good Latin student yet, and I'm not quite sure why they have a different vowel in the middle in the second set, I noticed that they are different, and I had to practice saying them differently.
Good.
Yeah, well, Kathy, I know that we get this question a lot. We had it a little bit last week with the catechism, because by the time you get through the whole year, you're going to have 28 catechism rules. And by the time you get through the whole year, you're going to have amassed a lot of vocabulary flashcards. If you do 8 a week, that's a lot by, let's say, week 20. So what do you do? How do you help families know how to review the previous cards when there's more than just the 8 from that week?
Yeah, I have a method that I use, and I know there's other ways to practice. One of the things that I like to do is have students not only do flashcards, but also make lists of words. So you might have a page in a notebook that's all of your first declension nouns that you've been studying, and then another page which is all your second declension nouns. So that's one thing you can do for that little bit of extra review, and it allows you to go through that list. Leigh mentioned also sorting your cards into all of your third conjugation verbs or your first conjugation verbs and looking for patterns that way. But there is a method that I came across many, many years ago that I've used for reviewing, because you will amass this huge amount of cards. And so it's going to become impossible to go through your whole big stack of cards every day. But what you can do is the cards that are new or the cards that are really unfamiliar to you, review those every day. Focus on those and use the method we just did, where you're laying cards down as you get them right. And then a second group of cards would be the ones that still need a little bit of work. So maybe you hesitate in getting the English definition, or maybe when you're going English to Latin, you can remember the word, but not the principal parts of the verbs. So you would want to review those more often, maybe every 2 or 3 times a week. And then as you realize you know the card, move it to a different stack. Or if you're in group 1 and you miss a card, move it to the group. Or if you have a group 2 card that you realize you know it really well, you can move it to group 3, or you can move a card back up if you realize it needs more work. And then group 3 would be the words that are really, really familiar, like deus, dei. We learn pretty quickly that means God, and I know that word really well. I don't even have to think of the definition. I just think of God when I see that word. And so I don't need to go over that word very often. I can put it in a third stack and just do it every few weeks. So what other ideas do you all have for reviewing?
One thing I want to remind people is do not do it for a long time.
Right.
It's truly a flashcard. It's truly like a 5 to 10 minute at the very most activity. And more brain, research is coming out. And what they're discovering is that most people, your brain kind of shuts down on the same topic after 20 minutes. But if you'll rest for an hour and do something totally different and then come back for another 5, all of a sudden the 20 minutes get compacted and your brain knows what to do. So it's good to have a Sabbath between information also. So I've been thinking about how our breaking up our academics into hour blocks is really not good for practice of anything. But we as homeschoolers can do what's super efficient. Do a whole bunch of flashcards with all the kids and then let the little ones go. Let them go have that Sabbath and come back for less often than the older ones. But even those kids, we probably need to do flashcards. It would probably be better if you did it twice a day for 5 minutes rather than once a day for 10.
Mm-hmm. I like to keep a set of flashcards beside my work area, so I could be doing math and then I can pick up the cards and go through them.
Nice.
Just a couple of minutes. Yeah. And then go back to another subject. So you're mixing things up.
Another thing is there are words that are similar enough that they can be confusing. So as you start to add to your vocabulary pile and you see things that look alike and you think, oh, right, delexy and lex. I know lex means law. So maybe this means, right, is delexy like 2 laws? So you put the 2 things together in the same pile for a while and help your brain learn to distinguish between them. So you might reorder your piles sometimes not to be your familiar, unfamiliar groupings. So you might want to land there on your regular basis, but sometimes you might want to have those words that are confusing together or do go together in groups. So if you want to make sure you have your prepositions or your conjunctions or your numbers, right? You might want to put them in a pile and practice that together so that your brain starts to recognize them as a group.
Yeah, and this is not, what I'm about to say is not super profound, but I think it's important for homeschooling. We always said that Memory Master was a group sport in our house. And what I meant by that was that I trained my younger students how to quiz their older siblings so that I could occasionally have a break from being the flashcard driller. And what was happening is that my younger kids, number 1, got a confidence boost because they got to be in charge for once. And number 2, they were also learning that it's impossible to go through flashcards without learning them yourself. And so it was, that's something that we just need to remember, that is just as Leigh mentioned, that we're going through them with all of our kids together, whether it's math or Latin or things from foundations, that it really should be a family sport. So with that lesson and the observations from the lesson, I think we're going to go back again to our verse. Is that right, Kathy? Right. Are you reading it for us today?
I can, yeah. Sic enim Deus dilexit mundum, ut filium suum unigenitum daret, ut omnis qui credet in eum non pereat, sed habeat vitam aeternam. Johannes 3:16.
I love hearing you. You're getting so much practice.
I know. I'm really working on pronunciation. It's kind of fun.
You can tell.
Well, and you saw I started to pronounce aeternam instead of aeternam. Sometimes I forget about that I sound. So what I thought we would do with this, Timothy, is that since you practice those flashcards, is do you looking through the verse, do you see words that you recognize, maybe some that we did today or some words that you knew previously?
Yep. So it's definitely some of the ones we did today. Dilexit is there, and that was one of our words. That's love, and mundum, world or mankind, are both in this verse. And then I remember from when we did this before and from other studies, filium is there. That's son. And omnis is there. That's all. We did that one today. Credit is to believe. And aeternam is eternity or eternal.
Yeah, it almost looks like the word. You can see the word eternal in it a little bit, can't you? And did it confuse you to see words like dilexit and mundum look a little different than the vocabulary flashcard because they have a little bit different ending?
No, not it didn't. It didn't confuse me. I saw them and recognized them, even though they
Good.
might be slightly different.
Good.
Yeah. I was thinking as you guys were, as you were reading it and Tim was going through it. First of all, I always like to be the observer, but I like how you kind of had gone on to other words you knew from elsewhere. And then you realized, oh, omnis was one of our words from today too. I'm going to go back and pick that up from the flashcards. And that's a nice natural thing that kids are going to do as they attend. His eyes skipped over it the first time, but then he went, oh, wait, I know that one too. That was one of my vocabulary flashcards from today. So that's always fun when they that start to attend. And then I was just thinking about our conversation from last week where we did the catechism. So we talked about the attributes of Latin nouns. Tim, do you remember that catechism rule? Should we quiz you again today?
Haha. The 4 parts, right? They have 4 attributes. The attributes of Latin nouns are number, case, gender, and declension. So
See,
that's probably the wrong order.
It's okay. Doesn't matter.
Attributes.
Yep, you got the right attributes. So the catechism worked, even though it just sat there for a whole week and he did nothing with it. And so Mom has been quizzing them on those attributes. So she could pick out that word mundum and just like Kathy did and say, hey, that looks different. What are the attributes of Latin nouns? And what do we know about this one from our flashcard and from the way it looks here? And so you can see that we're getting the rules and the words together. And that's a very fast thing to connect those two tasks together.
Something I want to comment on, this is the C.S. Lewis approach to language. If you read his books, you know why I said that. But I mean, this is just my second time being on, and I haven't looked at Latin in probably 10 years since David left the house. And what this is showing me is if you just take this one sentence today, and we just did everything we knew to do, nothing we didn't know to do, just what we knew to do. And then tomorrow I did a different sentence, and the next day a different sentence. Probably in about 8 weeks, I'd be doing paragraphs. But we go right into the page turning and so many exercises needing to be done that we don't allow that building time.
Yeah.
So I really like this. You guys are doing great.
I love that, Leigh. Yeah, and we can have just the catechism allows you to start having that beginning conversation. So all of these skills that are on page 7 of the catalog are right here. We know the English, so we can have a quick conversation where we say, "Hey, do you memorized this verse in Wednesday night church? Do you know any of the words? Compare them to the Latin. How can that help you?" Translate it right here at the dining room table in 5 to 10 minutes. And then what was our catechism rule about nouns? Okay, well, let's apply it to one of these nouns. Let's pick one of them from our vocabulary cards that we just went through and practice the catechism on it. And so it allows you to have that very rich conversation and quickly get into the language. I appreciate what you said, Leigh. That's so true. Great. Well, I started segueing into your next idea, Kathy, a little bit early, but because I talked about how vocabulary and flashcards in any strand are a group sport. So I know, Kathy, that you have written a blog post about this and you have lots of ideas. So you want to start us off there?
Yeah, I have lots of ideas for using flashcards as activities with your children and to bring the whole family together and doing them. Let me tell you a story first, though. When my children were young, and I don't think it was Latin flashcards, it might have been multiplication flashcards. And we lived in a house that had a split staircase, so it had like 4 steps up to a landing. And my son loved to jump off the landing down onto the carpeted floor. So what I did was I placed the flashcards on the stairs, and he would have to run, grab a flashcard, climb up to that stair, answer the flashcard, and jump down. And then he could go to the second one and jump down, and then the third one and jump down. He never got hurt. It was carpeted. But just something really active like that was really fun. And I was thinking about Latin flashcards. You could take verb cards and you could have the kids do charades or actually act them out. Like you might call out a Latin word like curro means to run, and then they would have to run. Or you could act something out and they have to give you the Latin word for it. Like you could do this, like a bird, and they would have to say, volo, I fly, something like that. Another thing you could do that's a little quieter, maybe with nouns, you could do Pictionary with them, where you would give a Latin word and they would draw it, or you would draw something and they would have to give you the Latin word. And then an even quieter game would be something, we call it Latin Larry, and I didn't make that name up. Somebody else gave that to me. And it's like a hangman game. So you just playing with the flashcards, and then you have Latin Larry, and you could give him a sword or give him a sandal or give him a toga if you get something right. So just all kinds of games that you can involve the whole family. Can you guys think of some other ones, Jennifer?
Yeah, I was thinking there must be something about boys and jumping, because my son did any flashcards that we had to do, and usually involved the trampoline. He liked to cultivate a rhythm as he was jumping and reviewing his words or his math times tables or whatever we were trying to memorize. He liked to jump, or this was less popular with me, but very popular with him. He liked to smack a tennis ball up against our garage door as hard and fast as he could while saying the things. It was like that rhythm that he cultivated was a good memory tool for him to say things more like a chant. The reason I said that was less popular with me is that a tennis ball hitting a garage door is very loud, the more skilled your child gets. And then my daughters were much more, I have one that loves to draw. So everything became a draw, how can I draw it or quietly act it out? And then one year, my challenge students actually said, on the last day, can we make up vocabulary crossword puzzles for each other? And we'll divide ourselves into teams, and each team will make one, and then we'll swap our crosswords. And that was really fun to watch them. They developed, I think they got in a little over their heads, because their crossword puzzles actually ended up being pretty complicated, which was fun for me to watch them realize that their game was pretty challenging, but it was good for them to pull out all their vocabulary and review it.
Yeah, couple things sometimes we can do too. We have a game called Pickles to Penguins. That's a little bit like apples to apples, but it's much more free association. So one student can start with a card and read it, and then any other student can jump on with a sort of any association. It could be an association of meaning, another of the same declension. It's in a verse they know, whatever it is. So there's this free association, connections being made, card to card, word to word. That's a really fun kind of activity to do with students who are a little more advanced, right? Maybe not your Challenge A first-time Latin student, because they're going to have a harder time making that connection. But some of those older kids, that works out really well. Or again, sorting into different piles. So you can ask them to sort and make categories of their flashcards. For something a little quieter, maybe a rainy day at the table if they're not able to go run outside and jump on the trampoline. But yeah, pile them in different orders and see how many different ways can you arrange your flashcards.
I love that. Did you say it's Pickles to Penguins?
It is. I'm
going to hold on to that name, because we play that game at our house, but we just very boringly call it Connections. I like Pickles to Penguins better. I'm gonna steal your name.
There's another game we play in the car a lot that's called Noah's Ark, where someone is Noah, and you have to ask, Noah, can I bring a something onto your ark? And the somethings are all governed by a rule, and Noah knows what the rule is, and everyone has to try and figure out what that rule is. So the rule might be it's only second declension nouns, or it might be that it's only words that begin with vowels, or it might be words found in the first chapter of Genesis, whatever that governing rule is. But the point is that the players have to figure out by asking, can I bring Delegere onto the ark? And Noah says, no, you can't bring Delegere, right? And you have to, by asking enough questions, you figure out what's the rule.
I love that. I'm going to try that. Very fun.
There's some good comments in the chat about games. Deb says that they do driveway flashcards because her son loves basketball. So when you get a flashcard, you take a basketball shot.
Nice.
And then Stephanie says chanting the flashcards is so helpful, and I agree. And getting that pronunciation right on the third and fourth conjugations can help you distinguish them from other conjugations. Yeah, and then Babs answered a question about if a version of Wordle exists. She gave us some links there if you want to go in the chat and look at those. Good. And and then Jana said, this is important. This is a good point, Jana. Would there be a benefit to adding to love to differentiate that card as a verb instead of a noun? Yes. Yes, I should have done that. Good.
Nice. See, you guys, you're comparing and noticing things. Your brain cannot help but compare. It will do it, whether you tell it to or not. So although we emphasize our 15 skills a lot, you should also know that they're happening, whether you want them to or not. So I really appreciated a lot of the things that we brought in today. So we're not going to say don't drill your flashcards in order to play games. We're saying both and. Both of those help your memory to solidify them. So you break up the flashcard drilling sometimes with games. And then I think we drove this point home, but the younger siblings can memorize vocabulary with the older siblings. The younger siblings could make a challenge for the older siblings or sometimes take a turn being the teacher. And then I just want to remind us, so in episode 1, we talked about the vision statements for the grammar strand. And the last one is always, the last vision statement for each strand of our programs is always about community. And I want to keep saying this, that our first community is that family gathered around the table or on the living room floor or at the park learning together. And so we're trying to make more and more space for us to really capitalize on what it means to have home education where all of us are learning together. So some of these flashcard games should be played at dinner or after dinner so Dad can join in the fun too. Right. I think we're good to take questions from the audience now, right? What questions do you guys have for us? Quiet today. Yeah.
So I have a question, Jennifer. So I think you mentioned it last week, the 3 vision statements per strand, and that's unfamiliar to me. Where might I find those?
So as we continue to roll things out, you'll see them on the landing page for that strand. So if you go to the right now, what we released in 26 was a lot of products in the reasoning strand. And so if you go to classical conversations, and then I think it's /reasoning together, you'll see those curriculum statements there on the landing page. And so the same thing will be true of the Common Latin landing page, which is that live yet, Kathy? I can't remember.
I think it is. Yeah.
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 So that's the best place for now. They'll be in the intros of the curriculum as well.
Okay. So you're saying though each strand is going to have its own landing page?
Yes.
Okay. So that's new.
Yeah.
That's
so
new.
We have, right. Okay. So we have the math map was kind of the one to lead the way. So we have the math map has a landing page, and then we had reasoning together, and then now we have Common Latin.
Okay.
Yeah. And there will be one for the next edition of Foundations as well.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. It's good to see you.
You too.
You'll also, I was going to say, you will also see those vision statements in the guides in the future.
Okay.
All right. They'll be in that section. Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Right. So right now the scriptures are there. The verses for each strand are there. And you're saying like eventually those vision statements will be there as well.
Yeah. Okay. They'll be the first paragraph underneath the verse.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So on that first thing that you showed us, I guess what would be week 2 in the Common Latin curriculum, it showed new vocab for tours 1, 2, and 3. Does that mean 4 and 5 do not have? You should already have all the vocabulary that you need by the time you get to challenge 2?
No, but there's assigned vocabulary for the first 3 tours, and after that, the students have more flexibility in choosing vocabulary that will aid them as they translate from the Vulgate.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, we're transitioning them toward more independence in their studies. So they'll start coming up with the ones that they've seen over and over again, or the ones that sparked their interest.
So I have a question. With the time we have left after everyone's other questions are answered, can we go back to John 3:16 and work on those words?
Sure.
Yes. You want me to answer this question in the chat? Has a Challenge 1 class piloted the new Latin? What does this look like for students who have studied Henley for 2 prior years?
Yeah, so I have done it with my Challenge 2 students. So they had 3 years of Henley. And the main difference was just them getting used to some words were new, of course. Some words are always going to be new. I think I've shared that story here on the book club that I've been studying Latin now for almost 20 years. And I will still go to church on Sunday using my Latin Bible and go, wow, I've never seen that word before. I guess I better add that to my bank of vocabulary words. So that's one thing. The students just had to learn some new vocabulary. And then mainly what they were doing, they brought all of their knowledge, their previous knowledge, to the new tasks. So mainly they were learning how to do new tasks. So they were getting used to reading the Vulgate out loud together, because maybe they hadn't practiced reading aloud together when they were in Henley, or they were practicing quid et quo much more often than they might have done when they were just working their way through Henley exercises. So it was mainly those two things, getting used to the new words and getting used to the tasks. But they had lots of knowledge, and you could see it when we would do the quid et quo and parse a verse on the board. They had lots of knowledge to contribute about the rules for those words. So it was very
Did any of them recognize that they were just doing the essentials tasks?
Yes. Yes, many of them. And so, in fact, Leigh, I'm glad you brought that up. The first week that we were doing John 1, they all said, well, now we did all the parsing. Can we please diagram it? So I said, sure. I'm not going to say no to that. We'll diagram it too. So, yeah. Do we have any more questions, Kathy? Or
No, that's it. There's no more questions. And I'm back to the John 3:16 slide if we want to pick out some more words
what we're
or
thinking?
compare, because we know this one.
Yeah, so I just wanted to be proud of myself and say, I bet period means parish.
Yes. Nice. You remembered that one. I know.
So, but sick, meaning, is that for that means for, or is it a different preposition in Latin? For God so loved the world.
Enum means for, and sick is like a thus. So it's like an introductory word to the.
So for thus God so loved the world. And then sent is daret? Are we pronouncing it like French? Or is it
gave?
Gave.
Oh, God. Okay, gave. And then begotten is unigenitum?
Mm-hmm.
But where's only?
In the uni.
Sum is his. Isn't sum his?
It's all one word, which it's in that unigenitum. Is one begotten, yeah.
So genitum is your generations, unis one. Yeah.
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 One of my favorite things about Latin is them combining those into one word. I just find that to be very cool. I like to collect words like that where they're smushed together. Sorry, Kathy, I cut you off.
Yeah, I was going to say a similar thing. Genitum is like begotten, born of, and then uni is one or only, so it's his only begotten son, and then suum is his own.
Mm-hmm.
What else can you pick out, Leigh?
I was going to say, maybe we can pick out the conjunctions, is ut and said.
Mm-hmm. Said is said means but. Enum is for.
Okay, then how about picking out the adjectives? So uni would be an adjective, but you don't pick it out, right?
Unigenitum would be an adjective. It's describing the son, right?
Mm-hmm.
It says, what kind of son
So it
is he?
relates
It's the
to-
only begotten.
Mm-hmm. Do you see another one?
Well, credit I'm struggling with. I mean, credits in creed, believe.
Mhm,
There we go.
Yep.
Come on,
There's
someone
one
else.
more. There's one more adjective. It's at the very end. Aeternam. What kind of life?
Mm,
Eternal
yes.
life.
Stephanie just pointed that one out in the
Yeah,
chat.
sorry. Nice. Well,
So now
there's a
okay.
who which clause.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, if there
I'm
is.
saying that because Linnell's here. She loves essentials. So we have qui credit, who believes in him.
We also have omnis. We learned in the vocabulary flashcards earlier that it's an adjective, meaning
Mhm.
all or every. But we know from this verse that we're saying that everyone who believes in him. So this is an adjective without a noun following it. It's an adjective functioning as a noun, basically. It's meaning, instead of just every, it's meaning every man or every person. And we would say everyone.
Which is very common in Latin, in the Vulgate, that noun or pronoun after the adjective gets dropped, the speaker / writer assumes you know from context what should be after that.
And in eum is a prepositional phrase, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's back up and do deus. So that's singular masculine.
Mhm.
That's two of the four. It's the case of it is it's the subject.
Mhm.
And what was the fourth? I can't remember.
Declension. Well, I think you already
Oh.
said it. Second declension.
Second. No,
Yes.
no, I didn't say it. Okay, so Tim, do filium. Tell me those four things.
Haha. Put me on the spot, Leigh, with my bad Latin. Let's see. Filium is singular, masculine. It is number case. Is it nominative? No. Kathy's giving me
Do
the
you
head
know?
shake.
Well, first of all, do you know the vocabulary word for filium? What's the vocabulary entry?
I don't.
Okay, I'm going to give it.
Filius.
Filius, filii.
Filii.
So now, does that give you the information you need to tell us what declension it is and whether this is?
Ooh. I can remember my
Usi.
foundations. Which declension is that?
Us, e, o, o.
Just remember,
M-O.
all girl words are first, right? All feminine words are first. Is that
Right.
correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so I just, girls rule, even in Latin. So that's how I would remember that declension. And then next comes the masculine. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm getting excited.
No, you're good. The second declension, masculine, and if you remember, if we were 3 or 4 lessons in, Tim, even if you were a first-year Latin student, you will have worked in task 4 on the charts, the us, e, o, o, e, orum, e, socis. So us, e, o, what does that tell you the case of this one would be?
Dative? No. What order are
Nominative,
they in?
genitive,
So
dative.
nominative, genitive, accusative,
Dative, accusative, ablative.
dative, accusative. So it's accusative.
Yeah, awesome. Very good. So if we were in task 6, actually trying to work through this verse, we would pull on all that memory that we'd done in the prior tasks. So we had a catechism question that asked what the cases are, and we had memorized nominative, subject, genitive, possessive, etc. So we'd memorized that. We'd memorized the second declension endings, the us, e, o, e, orum, e, socis. We'd done that. We'd memorized the attributes of Latin nouns. And then as a parent, I would be pulling that information together as we wrestled through trying to parse this one word.
Yes. And again, broken record here. At the practicum this summer, when we did this task, everyone broke out into singing us-e-o-um-o, us-e-o-um-o, because it is impossible for you to think about that without singing your foundation song. And then we build community by all singing it together. And then we could move on and say, okay, well, what did that song mean?
Oh, that's good.
So I'm looking at habeat meaning have, and I'm wondering if it became our language because B and V are pronounced so similarly. Habeat, but they put it right.
Mm-hmm.
I never noticed that before.
That does happen a lot with consonants as languages morph, where we get lazy or we get isolated in a group where we're talking. And so we change the consonant. Mhm.
Like people who say salmon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any more questions, Kathy? Are we good?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Stephanie pointed out that itiernum is a quality adjective.
Yes.
Deb pointed out that suum is a personal pronoun adjective.
Yes. You guys are good. You know all these things. So great. Well,
These
I
are really
guess.
Well, I want to make sure you all know that the Mathematics book club's still going on at 1 o'clock. So since you're available at 2, maybe you can come sometimes to that also. Because there's a bunch of math people here on the Latin. Hi, Jana. Hi, James.
Nice.
It's fun to see you guys again and again. Yep, absolutely. So I think we're going to meet again. So if you've missed episodes, they are on Leigh's YouTube channel. The first of the ones we've done here in Common Latin. And then this one from today will be added. And next time we are moving forward to task 4, which we kind of dipped into a little bit at the end today. We started playing with it. So we will look at practicing the forms a little bit more next week, and we'll be live at the same time. And we look forward to seeing you guys then. So
thank you, everybody.
bye, guys.